The windshield wipers couldn't keep up with the sleet. I sat in the driveway of my parents' house in Mississauga, engine idling, holding a white envelope containing two first-class tickets to Banff Springs Hotel for their anniversary, 40 years of marriage. I thought they deserved something beautiful. I was wrong about a lot of things that night. I could see through the front window. The living room lights were on. My father, Gil, was sitting in his recliner with a glass of rye whiskey balanced on his knee. My mother, Rhonda, was perched on the arm of the couch, arms crossed, watching the front door like she was waiting for a bill collector. My sister Celeste was there too, cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by fabric swatches and mood boards, her phone propped against a stack of magazines, recording herself for content nobody watched. I walked in without knocking. I'd lived here my entire life. I still paid rent here, which I'll get to. Gil didn't look up. He just spoke to the window like I was a draft coming in under the door. "We need your room, Eloise. Celeste is launching her brand. She needs a studio space, a creative headquarters. You understand." I didn't understand. I stood there holding the envelope, snow melting off my coat onto the hardwood floor. Rhonda filled the silence. "We've already cleared it out, sweetheart. Your things are in bags by the garage. It's nothing personal. Celeste has momentum right now. She needs the space more than you do." I looked down the hallway toward my bedroom. The door was open. I could see it from where I stood. The walls were painted lavender, a color I hated. Ring lights were clamped to the desk I'd had since high school, and my bookshelf was gone, replaced by a garment rack hung with polyester blouses still wearing their shine tags. My entire life had been folded into 4 black garbage bags sitting on the cold concrete by the garage door. Gil finally looked at me. He took a sip of his rye, slow, theatrical. "You're 31, Eloise. You fix computers. You drive a Corolla that's older than your sister. Honestly, it's embarrassing having you here. Go find a place. Go live your life. Or don't. I really don't care anymore." Celeste didn't even glance up from her phone. She was adjusting a ring light remotely, testing angles in the room that used to be mine. I placed the Banff envelope on the hall table. I didn't say what it was. I picked up my garbage bags, loaded them into the trunk of my 2011 Corolla, and backed out of the driveway without a word. The sleet had turned to freezing rain. The Corolla's heater made a grinding noise, then gave up and blew cold air. I drove east on the 401 until I found a motel near Whitby with a vacancy sign buzzing in the dark. I sat on the motel bed. The room smelled like cleaning solution and cigarettes from a decade ago, and I let myself be still for the first time all night. They thought I fixed computers. They thought I scraped by on freelance IT support, helping dentists reset their passwords and setting up Wi-Fi for real estate offices. They saw the Corolla, the thrift store jackets, the messy ponytail, and they filled in the rest of the story themselves. They never once asked what I actually did. Not once in 15 years. Here's what I actually do. I am a forensic data analyst for one of the largest insolvency firms in the country. When a corporation collapses, when assets vanish, when someone cooks the books and investors start screaming, my firm gets the call. And I'm the one who sits down at the terminal and finds where the money went. I trace shell companies through the Cayman Islands. I reconstruct deleted ledgers from server ghosts. I've been an expert witness in federal fraud cases. I once helped the CRA recover $14 million in hidden assets from a numbered company in Montreal. Last year, my income was $740,000 before bonuses. I own a condo in Liberty Village under a numbered corporation. I have investments in 3 index funds, a TFSA maxed every January, and a self-directed RRSP that would make my father's pension look like pocket change. But I never told them. I never told anyone in my family, because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. To understand why, you have to go back to 2001. I was 6 years old. Gil had scraped together enough to buy into a commercial real estate syndicate in Vaughan. It was his ticket, his one shot at wealth. But the week before closing, I fell off the monkey bars at school and shattered my elbow. Emergency surgery. Weeks of physiotherapy. Gil missed the closing date and lost his deposit. The syndicate went on to develop a plaza that's now worth tens of millions. He never forgave me. He didn't hit me. He did something worse. He made me the family's original sin. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every time money was tight, He'd look at me across the table with that flat, empty expression and say, "You owe this family, Eloise. You took the future right out from under us. You were born expensive." When I turned 16, Gil started charging me rent, $600 a month. He called it reparations. By the time I was 18, the amount climbed to $900. I paid it because I had nowhere else to go and because some part of me, the small, stupid, hopeful part, still believed that if I paid enough, he'd eventually forgive me. He never did. Instead, the money went to Celeste. Ballet lessons when she was 12, a nose job when she was 19. Rhonda told me it was a medical necessity, a deviated septum, but I saw the before photos on Celeste's Instagram. There was no septum issue. There was a perfectly fine nose that wasn't trendy enough. At 22, Celeste decided she was an influencer. She needed a camera, a ring light, a wardrobe, a brand consultant. Gil told me I needed to contribute more. I was the big sister. I had a duty. I paid for all of it. And I stayed invisible. I wore my camouflage, the Corolla, the hoodies, the quiet life of a woman who supposedly reset routers for a living. Because I had watched Gil my entire life, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he ever found out what I was worth, he wouldn't just take from me. He would devour me. So I sat in that motel room in Whitby, wrapped in a thin comforter, and I let the anger settle into something colder, something functional. Then I reached for my laptop. It wasn't in my bag. I dumped everything onto the bed. Chargers, notebooks, a portable hard drive, a pair of headphones. But the laptop, the matte gray ThinkPad that held encryption keys, client files, proprietary forensic tools, and access credentials to cases worth millions, was gone. My throat closed. I didn't panic. Panic is a luxury for people who haven't been trained to think under pressure. I grabbed my phone, opened the tracking app, and watched the blue dot pulse on the screen. It wasn't at the house. It was sitting at a pawn shop on Dundas Street in Mississauga. Cash Galaxy. Open until midnight. I drove back in the freezing rain. When I walked in, the store smelled like dust and old electronics. A man behind the counter was watching hockey highlights on a small TV bolted to the wall. I told him my laptop was pawned without my consent. I showed him the serial number on my phone screen. He barely looked up. "Can't release it without the ticket," he said. "Store policy. Or file a report and come back in 30 days. I went back to my car. I opened the garbage bags right there in the Cash Galaxy parking lot, kneeling on frozen asphalt, pulling apart my own clothes with numb hands. It took 11 minutes. I found the pawn slip crumpled inside a pair of jeans, stained with coffee, wrinkled into a ball. Rhonda hadn't just packed my things, she had picked through them first. She'd pawned my laptop like it was a used toaster. I paid $652 to buy back my own property. I sat in the car, holding it against my chest, the metal cold through my coat. I breathed in, breathed out, and then the second notification hit. An email from Service Ontario. Transfer of vehicle ownership. Gil had transferred the title of my Corolla, the car I was sitting in. The car I had bought with cash 7 years ago but registered under Gil's name because he'd told me it would lower the insurance through his family bundle. He'd sold it to someone on Kijiji 4 hours ago for $6,200. The buyer was supposed to pick it up that weekend. I called Rhonda. She answered on the first ring. "You pawned my laptop," I said. "Don't be dramatic, Eloise. We raised you. We clothed you. We fed you. That laptop is a small installment on what you owe this family. Besides, Celeste's brand launch needs a down payment for the venue. You can always buy another computer. You're single. What do you even spend money on?" She hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. The freezing rain ticked against the windshield like a clock counting down. Then I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was an auditor, and the audit had just begun. I didn't sleep that night. The motel heater clicked on and off in cycles, but the cold kept me sharp. I opened my laptop and went to work. First, the car. I ran the Kijiji listing through cached search. Gil had posted it with photos he'd taken from the driveway, advertised it as reliable Toyota, lady-driven, no lowballers. He listed the price at $6,200. The buyer had already sent an e-transfer. I screenshotted everything, archived it, timestamped it. Then I turned to the real target. Their finances. In my line of work, I have access to corporate registry databases, property lien searches, and legal filing systems that most people don't know exist. I ran Gil and Rhonda through everything. What I found wasn't just bad, it was a carcass. They had refinanced the house twice in 4 years, both times through B lender, the kind that charges interest rates you'd normally see on a credit card. They owed $387,000 on a property assessed at $610,000, 3 credit cards maxed, a line of credit frozen by the bank, and buried in the Ontario Superior Court filings, a notice of sale under mortgage filed 62 days ago. They were in power of sale. The bank was already moving to take the house. They had maybe 90 days left. The house they just kicked me out of didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to TD Bank, and TD was sharpening the knife. But a foreclosure isn't leverage. A foreclosure isn't leverage. A foreclosure is just gravity. I needed a crime. I pulled up their most recent mortgage renewal application, the one filed to try to stop the power of sale. I couldn't access the lender's copy directly, but I knew Gil. I knew his arrogance. I knew his shortcuts. I picked up my phone and called Maxine Chu, a corporate litigation lawyer in Toronto. I'd worked with her on 3 insolvency cases. She owed me nothing, but she respected me, and in my world, that's worth more than favors. I need a numbered company, I told her. Call it Ridgeline Capital, Inc. Register it as a private equity consultancy specializing in distressed residential assets. And then I need you to call my father. Maxine didn't ask why. She'd seen enough fraud in her career to recognize the sound of someone building a case. She just said, I'll have it done by morning. This was the trap. In forensic work, we call it a controlled disclosure. You don't confront a liar. You give them a stage. You let them perform. You let them hand you the evidence wrapped in their own confidence. Maxine called Gil the next afternoon. She told him Ridgeline Capital represented a private investor looking to acquire and rehabilitate distressed properties in the GTA. She told him the investor was particularly interested in family-owned homes with conversion potential. She told him there might be a refinancing package available if the financials checked out. I monitored Gil's email. He had never removed me from the family iCloud account. He didn't even know I was on it. 15 years of digital negligence, and now it was a window into everything. He replied to Maxine within 7 minutes. 7 minutes. He attached his resume, a list of home improvements he'd never actually made, and a glowing description of Celeste's media empire as an asset that added cultural value to the property. Maxine sent the follow-up the next morning. To proceed with our assessment, we require your most recent mortgage application as submitted to your current lender. This is standard for portfolio matching. Gil sent it within the hour. No hesitation, no questions, no lawyer consulted, just blind, greedy compliance. I opened the PDF. I scrolled past the inflated property value, past the understated debts. I stopped at the income section. Primary applicant, Gil Moreau, annual income, $72,000. Co-applicant, Celeste Moreau, annual income, $195,000. Source, digital media brand partnerships and consulting. I read it 3 times. $185,000. Celeste didn't make $185,000. Celeste didn't make $185. Her brand was an Instagram account with 4,300 followers, half of them bots, and a Depop store selling knockoff accessories. She had never filed a T4 in her life. She had never reported a single dollar of self-employment income to the CRA. Gil had fabricated his daughter's income on a federally regulated mortgage application. Under the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 36(2), that is fraud. Obtaining credit by false pretense. It carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in a federal penitentiary. I saved the document. I backed it up to 3 encrypted cloud servers and 1 physical drive locked in a safety deposit box at a Scotiabank branch I'd never used before. Gil thought he'd sent a PDF to an investor. He'd handed the executioner the blade. I closed the laptop. Through the motel window, the sun was coming up over the 401, pale and cold. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family debt. I was the creditor, and I was about to collect. Maxine set the meeting for the following Thursday. She booked a conference room at her firm's office on Bay Street in Toronto, 22nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district. She told Gil that the silent partner behind Ridgeline Capital, an eccentric venture capitalist she referred to only as the principal, wanted to finalize the arrangement in person. She mentioned that Celeste should attend, since the investor had expressed particular interest in her entrepreneurial profile. They dressed up for it. Of course they did. I arrived an hour early. I took the service elevator. Maxine met me in the hallway outside the conference room. She didn't ask if I was sure. She just handed me a key card to the observation suite next door, a small room with a one-way glass panel and a live audio feed. I watched them arrive on the monitor. Gil walked in first, wearing a charcoal suit that pulled across the shoulders. He'd gotten a haircut. Rhonda followed in a navy dress and pearl earrings I'd never seen before. I wondered briefly whether those pearls had been purchased with my rent money. Celeste trailed behind, face buried in her phone, wearing an outfit that probably cost more than my first month at the motel. They sat at the long walnut table. Maxine offered them sparkling water and coffee. Gil asked for scotch. Maxine poured him a Glenfiddich from the credenza without blinking. "This is more like it," Gil said, swirling the glass. He leaned back in the leather chair and crossed his legs. "You can tell your investor that the Moreau family takes partnerships seriously. We're builders, always have been." Rhonda nodded along, rehearsed and polished. Celeste was taking a selfie with the skyline behind her. Maxine laid out a stack of documents. Bound, tabbed, professional. She walked them through the highlights. Ridgeline Capital would consolidate their existing mortgage, inject operating capital for Celeste's brand development, and provide a 12-month interest-free bridge loan secured against the property. All they had to do was sign. Gil didn't read it. He didn't even pick it up. He flipped to the signature page like a man autographing a fan's baseball cap. Rhonda signed after him. Celeste signed as witness, one hand still holding her phone. What they thought they signed was a rescue package. What they actually signed was a confession and a transfer. Buried on page 38, section 9.4, was a cross-default clause. It stated that if any information provided in the supporting application materials was found to be materially false, the agreement would trigger an automatic default. And on page 44, section 12.1, was a deed transfer held in escrow, activated upon default. The property title would transfer immediately and irrevocably to Ridgeline Capital, Inc. They signed their house over to me while drinking my scotch. I stood up in the observation suite and adjusted my blazer. In the monitor's reflection, I didn't see the girl who drove away in the freezing rain. I saw someone else entirely. Maxine gathered the signed documents, tapped the edges flush, and placed them in a leather folio. She looked at the family and smiled politely. "Wonderful," she said. "Before we finalize the disbursement, the principal would like to address you directly. She's been observing the session and would like to introduce herself." Gil straightened in his chair. "She?" He sounded intrigued. "By all means. I'd love to meet the woman betting on the Moreau name." Maxine walked to the side door and opened it. I stepped through. No hoodie, no ponytail, no thrift store jacket. I wore a fitted black suit, tailored in Yorkville. Hair down, blown out, sharp. I looked like money because I was money. I had always been money. They just never bothered to look. Gil's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Rhonda blinked rapidly, her mouth half open, trying to rearrange reality into something she could explain. Celeste looked up from her phone for the first time all evening. "Eloise?" Gil said. His voice cracked on the second syllable. He turned to Maxine. "What is this?" "This is my daughter. She does IT support. She can't even afford a decent car. Call security." Maxine didn't move. She closed her briefcase with a single, clean snap. I walked to the head of the table. I didn't sit down. I stood over him the way he'd stood over me every time he reminded me what I owed. I pulled a crumpled yellow pawn slip from my jacket pocket and smoothed it onto the walnut tabletop. Rhonda's voice was barely a whisper. What is that? That's the ticket for my laptop, I said. The one you pawned at Cash Galaxy on Dundas for 650 Tylers. I bought it back that same night. I paused. And then I bought something else. Gil stood up fast, knocking his scotch. His face was flushing red from the collar up. Enough. This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing yourself. Get out before it. Sit down. I didn't raise my voice. I used the tone I use in depositions when a CFO is lying about offshore transfers and I need them to understand that the next words out of their mouth will be used in court. It's not loud. It's gravity. Gil sat down. Maxine, I said. Show them the acquisition. The projector hummed. White light flooded the wall behind me. A property title filled the screen. Property address, 42 Thorndale Crescent, Mississauga, Ontario. Previous registered owner, Gil Moreau and Rhonda Moreau. Current registered owner, Ridgeline Capital, Inc. Gil stared at it. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. That's just collateral paperwork, he stammered. That's part of the loan. It's not a loan, I said. It's a transfer of title. You signed a deed in lieu of foreclosure, held in escrow, activated by default. And the default has already been triggered. I tapped the remote, the slide changed. Now the wall showed the mortgage application Gil had emailed to Ridgeline Capital, his own submission, enlarged to fill the screen. I pointed at the income line. Co-applicant, Celeste Moreau. Annual income, $185,000. I looked at my father. Celeste doesn't make $185,000, I said. She's never filed income with the CRA. She has no T4 slips, no HST number, no registered business. You fabricated her income to qualify for a federally regulated mortgage. Under Section 36(2) of the Criminal Code, that's fraud. Obtaining credit by false pretense. Maximum penalty, 10 years. The room was so quiet I could hear the projector fan. Section 9.4 of the agreement you just signed, I continued, states that any materially false information in the supporting documents triggers an automatic cross-default. Section 12.1 states that upon default, the deed in lieu transfers the property title to the lender immediately. No hearing required. No court order needed. I leaned forward, palms flat on the table. You lied on a federal application, Dad. That means you were in default before you finished signing. The house transferred to Ridgeline Capital the moment the ink hit the page. I let the silence do the work. Gil looked at the screen, then at me, then at Celeste, who had finally put her phone down and was staring at the projected mortgage application like it was a bomb. You wouldn't, he whispered. Your family. Family, I repeated. I let the words sit in my mouth like something counterfeit. Family doesn't throw your belongings into garbage bags. Family doesn't pawn your livelihood for a venue deposit. Family doesn't pawn your livelihood for a venue deposit. Family doesn't sell your car out from under you while you're driving it. I straightened up. Checked my watch. Here's what happens next. You have 72 hours to vacate my property. If you're not out, or if a single fixture is damaged, I forward the mortgage application and all supporting evidence to the Ontario Provincial Police Financial Crimes Unit. I'll also file a complaint with FinTrack for suspicious mortgage activity and refer the matter to the CRA for tax fraud related to Celeste's unreported phantom income. I picked up the pawn slip from the table and slipped it back into my pocket. 10 years, Dad, or you leave quietly. Your choice. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. He looked like a man watching his own house burn down, which, in a sense, he was. They left. Not in 72 hours. In 36. I didn't go back to watch them move out. I didn't need to. Maxine's office handled the verification. A locksmith changed the locks on a Tuesday morning. I received a text confirmation with a photo of the new deadbolt. I did the math before I wrote the relocation check. I deducted the market value of the stolen Corolla. I deducted the $650 I paid to recover my laptop. I deducted 15 years of rent payments, $600 to $900 a month, every dollar tracked in a spreadsheet I'd kept since I was 16 years old. The total came to just over $147,000 in money I should never have paid. The final check I sent them was $4,200, enough for first and last on a basement apartment in Oshawa. I included a typed note. Consider the balance settled. Word moved fast. Within a month, Gil was working the returns desk at a Canadian Tire in Ijack. Rhonda was living in the Oshawa rental, calling relatives in New Brunswick, asking for money she'd never pay back. And Celeste, the influencer with $185,000 in phantom income, deleted her Instagram, sold her ring lights on Facebook Marketplace, and got a job at a Shoppers Drug Mart stocking shelves. Turns out you can't pay rent with engagement metrics. I listed the house through a realtor in Port Credit. It sold in 11 days, $47,000 over asking. Toronto spillover market. I donated a portion to the Canadian Women's Foundation, put the rest into a balanced ETF, and moved on. Before the sale closed, I walked through the house one last time. It was empty. My footsteps echoed off the hardwood. I stopped at the door to my old room, the one they painted lavender for Celeste's creative headquarters. The ring lights were gone. The garment rack was gone. The walls were bare except for a single nail hole and a faint rectangle of discoloration where a mirror had hung. I didn't repaint it. I left that lavender exactly as it was. A monument. A receipt. I walked out, locked the deadbolt, and listened to the click. Clean. Final. Earned. At my new car, a Lexus NX, registered in my own name, I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts. Gil Moreau, block. Rhonda Moreau, block. Celeste Moreau, block. No goodbye, no speech, no catharsis performance. Just silence, the kind you buy with the truth. Family isn't blood, it's respect. And if they can't afford that, they can't afford you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from right now. I want to see how far this story travels.